Hello, and welcome today to part two of our mini series, our little class on how to figure out what you want. So let me start with a really quick recap. In part one, we laid some foundation. We did a quick and hopefully fun exercise to help us get in touch with a very important concept, and that is our own willingness. And this is a key ingredient to figuring out what you really want and then actually getting it, because it doesn't matter what you think you want or how badly you think you want it or how good you are at doing it or how much you love it, or none of that matters without your willingness. In fact, if you aren't willing, listen up, if you're not willing, it may not even be what you really want. Okay? There's something that's underneath that. Okay? And also, once you know what you are and you are not willing to do, you can begin to identify what's getting in your way of getting it. All right? Willingness. Go back and look at lesson one again. If that's not what you took away from it, do it again. Do that Venn diagram again and start getting at your true willingness. So this actually leads directly, of course, into what we're going to talk about today. Today we're going to talk about two things. First, what is wanting? I mean, what does wanting even mean? And second, why do you want the things you want? What do they really mean to you? What do they represent to you? Okay, you ready? All right, first, let's talk about the meaning of wanting. What is wanting? Okay, at the most basic level, okay, this is a sense that there's something missing. Now, it can be real or imaginary, but either way, what we're feeling is an absence. We're sensing a lacking. We're experiencing it as sort of this little empty spot somewhere, and we want to fill it. Now, the trouble starts because so often the things we think we want are just physical, seemingly tangible placeholders. They're stand-ins for what we really want, which is the feeling that this empty spot has been filled or no longer needs filling. Okay? Think about that. What we're really looking for is not this thing. It's not the thing we can buy. It's not the changes this other person can make. It's our feeling that this emptiness has been filled or that it no longer needs filling. That's what we're going for. We're looking for relief from this feeling of having an empty spot. So our default mode is actually to look out there, outside ourselves, for something that is tangible or that someone else can do, something we can buy, somewhere we can move, maybe a new relationship, something we can quantify or measure or check off. And that's why, listen again, we can sometimes get exactly the thing we think we want and still not feel satisfied, still feel like that itch hasn't been scratched. And that's one of the reasons we end up with so much stuff and so many relationships that just aren't really satisfying. So in one sense, we have this wealth, we have an overabundance of stuff in relationships, only none of it fulfilled the real need, the true desire. It didn't satisfy that deeper craving. And that's why we're still looking for that sense of fulfillment. We're looking for external evidence that says we should already be satisfied. And that's why it's so essential to understand what we're really wanting and what it really means to us. Okay, so that's what we need to tackle. That's what we need to tackle. But here's what really happens, okay? Instead of thinking about this little needful spot and what it's really asking for, you and your subconscious tend to do one of two things, okay? The first thing is you start filling it with anything in this desperate attempt to get rid of the feeling. We want relief from the feeling, but we want to have this desperate attempt to get rid of the feeling that something is missing. And that's at the root of things like shiny object syndrome or retail therapy or trying to fix other people. Okay? None of that addresses your own real emptiness. So you end up with more stuff and more dissatisfaction in either your new or your existing relationships, but you're still feeling the wanting, the empty spot. It's a vicious cycle. The second possibility, oh my goodness, this one is so seductive. You just go straight to dwelling on what it is you don't want. So if you think the problem is a person or a relationship in your life, you may dwell on what you don't like about them or what you don't like about the relationship, and you try to fix some perceived problem about them. You try to get them to change their own behavior, okay? Or if it's something, maybe if it's something you think you could buy, you tell yourself you can't afford this, so you'll do that instead, only it isn't really a true fair trade. So now you've spent money on something and it's taking up space, physically, financially, emotionally, even your brain bandwidth, but the wantingness is still there. In fact, let's go back to the first little example I just gave right there. If it's a person that you're trying to change, they often just dig their heels in deeper. They don't want to be pushed out of their comfort zone. And that change you want them to make is probably way outside their comfort zone. They're not feeling any personal benefit or mutual benefit. They're just feeling threatened. That's all. There's no incentive in most cases for them to make the change you want them to make, because that change is so often for your benefit, not for a mutual benefit or even for their benefit. And here's the real kicker. Oh my gosh, this one's painful, at least to me. Your subconscious is noticing all of this. It's paying attention to what you are paying so much attention to. And it's thinking, oh, she must want more of that. Oh, she sure is paying a lot of attention to it. And so your sweet little subconscious gets really busy making sure you get more of what you're thinking about and more of what it thinks you want, because you're thinking so much about it. Only you're really thinking about what you don't want. So another vicious cycle. And both are completely self-defeating approaches. In fact, when you attempt either of these ways to fulfill your wanting, you'll likely end up with a double whammy. And this happens all the time, not just in big life-changing situations. Percentage-wise, there's a lot more of these tiny little wantings that happen every day. So let's play with this a moment. Literally, let's play. Okay, tell a story on myself. So this happened to me recently with shoes, of all things. Now, I like shoes, but actually I like going barefoot best. So if I'm going to wear shoes, I want them to be really cute and really comfortable. And a couple of years ago, I gave away a pair of sandals in one of these overzealous closet purges, and I've regretted it ever since. So, in no time at all, I was looking for a replacement. This was probably 2 years ago. A month or two ago, though, I finally stumbled on the perfect replacement pair online. They were exactly what I wanted, except they were just a little bit more than I wanted to pay. Now, they were not outrageous, mind you. I could afford them, but they were just a little outside that, I guess, comfort zone of what I had decided I wanted to pay. Now, sometimes a decision like that would be good guidance. It keeps us from splurging needlessly, but sometimes it's just limiting. And the trick is learning how to discern the difference. Discernment, that's a biggie for a lot of us. Well, in general. In this case, I hesitated. I argued with myself, even though my logical mind knew this was exactly what I wanted, and yes, I knew I could do it. I didn't jump on them. Even though I've been looking for them for 2 years, and I knew they were perfect, and I knew I would wear them all the time, and I knew they were worth the price. So here's a plot twist for you. While I was dawdling, I saw another cute pair of sandals. Now, I didn't need these. They did not fulfill this gap, this empty spot in my wardrobe. They were so cute and they cost less and they made me feel like I was doing something in my shoe department. So I got them. And then you know what? They just sat there in my closet, still in the bag. I didn't wear them. Hardly even thought about them. And worse, so much worse, I was still pining for that other pair of sandals, the pair that would have done exactly what my wardrobe needed and would have completely fulfilled my wanting. So finally, I decided to return the substitute pair and order the ones I really wanted, only by then, the ones I really wanted were sold out. I had missed my opportunity by overthinking and by dawdling and by substituting, okay, by not understanding or not respecting why I wanted the pair of sandals. Now, this might seem like a silly story, kind of is, but there's also a point. Instead of sticking with why I wanted these new sandals and the wantingness that it was really all about, I lost sight of my why. And I did something else instead that gave me the illusion of doing something for just a minute, the illusion of getting what I wanted, but it was just an illusion. It was just a substitute. And in this case, I knew what I wanted. I even knew why I wanted it and still failed to stay the course. So double whammy, the sense of wanting was compounded. Lots of times though, okay, silliness over for a minute, lots of times though, we don't pause to find out why we want what we want. What itch is it we're really trying to scratch? So in the end, we end up trying to fill that wanting space with something, anything, something that seems close to fitting the need or gives us the illusion of doing something about it because we want the feeling of wanting to go away. So we grab at anything to push it away. Now, if we were to dig into it, we'd often find we had a pretty good idea of what we didn't want. But that often leads to actions that aren't on target and not very helpful. I mean, they might give a temporary and false sense of satisfaction, but at some point in time, that shiny would wear off and we'd be right back where we started or sometimes worse. So on top of the wanting, now we've also lost time, we've spent money, or maybe we've further damaged a relationship. So getting a better handle on why we want what we want and then acting on our why is crucial. It helps us understand what we're really looking for and what need it is we're really wanting to fulfill. And that leads to making better decisions and taking better actions, especially in the big, hairy, tough moments. But it's also in the little shoe ones too. And the little shoe ones are important. The thing is, instilling the practice of pausing first to understand why we want what we want and practicing it in the little ones, practicing it all the time in the little ones. It helps us be ready for the big ones when they come along. And they will. They do. More importantly, in looking at why we want what we want, we also often discover we were a little mistaken about what we thought would address that wanting. So identifying what having this desire filled actually represents to you, what it really means to you, what gap or emptiness or woundedness you're trying to fulfill, that can help you uncover what you thought you wanted and that maybe it wasn't what you wanted at all. So the real question, even the question behind the why, what will be different? Or maybe what do you want to be different? as the result of fulfilling this wanting, filling this little empty spot. So sometimes in examining our why, we discover, ooh, here's another one. We discover that we actually treasure that empty spot, that white space. And we're just kind of trying to fill it on autopilot because, I don't know, maybe we're afraid of having an empty spot or white space, or we didn't pause to let ourselves feel this like, oh, that feels nice. That feels less cluttered. Yeah, and that is actually something we've been taught, this filling our wants on autopilot. That's not inherent. So how do we change that and get more on track with fulfilling our real wants and our real needs? Now, we talked a little bit about lists in part one. And back when I started doing this work very consciously with myself, and then also testing it with clients, because I'm always my first guinea pig, and then test it out with real life people. Okay. You know, so I had this regular traditional list, and back then it included these things. Well, first of all, there was a target revenue for the company I owned, a dream house, finding someone special to date or to marry, for my children to be happy and healthy, to stop worrying all the time about everything, and to stop feeling scared all the time, and to stop, oh my gosh, to stop feeling like something was missing, that I was missing out. You know, it seems like a reasonable list. And I was doing all the conventional things, like having a list and, thinking positive thoughts and visualizing, the usual. So why wasn't it working? And the clue that finally got my attention was that my business was doing well. I could actually afford a nice house. I was dating a really nice man, and my daughters were doing great. So on the surface, my list was already fulfilled, but I was still worried and scared all the time. I still felt like something was missing. So why did I still feel like my desires were just out of reach when the objective evidence said, you're already here? Now, the realization that I already had almost everything I claimed to want, at least on paper, just screamed there had to be more to it. And now I was on a mission to find out what that was. And I was beginning to understand how easy it was to be mistaken about what I wanted, and how hard that made it to get what I really wanted. And I was recognizing, oh my gosh, I recognized this really just awful feeling of chasing my own tail. So clearly, the basic list approach wasn't working. So I started asking myself some different questions. And the most important one did turn out to be, what did I believe would be different or feel different for me when those desires were fulfilled? Now, to walk through how I found those answers, let's look at some examples from my own list. Let me give you the Reader's Digest version, then we'll go back and I'll actually show you how I got there. So, dream house. Well, okay. Prestige. Safe and nurturing haven. Prestige, worthiness. Safe and nurturing haven, security. Okay, money goals. And keep in mind, these are not bad goals to have. We're just digging a little deeper, okay? So money goals. Status. Freedom from financial worries. Status, worthiness. Freedom from financial worries, security. Okay? More love. Person of my very own. Less loneliness. Person of my own, worthiness. Less loneliness, security. So did you see the theme that just emerged there? What they had in common was that they were all really about my search for security and worthiness. Now, I started applying this little approach that I'm about to tell you about to everything, even shoes. And it turned out everything, every single thing I ever wanted was about this search for worthiness and security. And that is all about our search for wholeness and love. So while all our desires, they actually fall into three big buckets: relationship, health, wealth. Okay. But they're all deeply, deeply rooted in our quest for security and worthiness, for wholeness and love, for belongingness. Here it is, right there. So I actually began testing this with clients because part of me just couldn't believe it was this simple. I mean, really, how could it be this basic? And through these wonderful, wonderful women that I was so privileged to be working with, the exact same pattern emerged over and over. It was like clockwork. And that, y'all, was another really big teaching for me, because even though their details were different, everything led to exactly the same place. Every single item on every single wish list pointed right back to our quest to our own true selves. And they were solidly rooted. They were solidly rooted in the stories we were telling ourselves about ourselves and about the things that happened and the things that we wanted in our relationships. They were all about the stories we told ourselves. And so as we worked through their stories, we found the exact same tender chord, no matter what was on their traditional list. Everything was always leading back to this deep-seated need to feel less alone in our own relationships, including our relationship with ourselves, to really find who we were born to be before the world started telling us who we should be. To burst out of our cages, to escape our comfort zones instead of just shrinking to fit inside, to stop trying to be a good little girl and start being the real woman inside, and to write our own story instead of playing into the one that was being written for us. Now, please don't misunderstand. There is absolutely nothing wrong whatsoever with wanting any of these things we want. Okay, but it's the understanding of what lies beneath them that puts the power of actually receiving them, of actual fulfillment into our hands. So let's talk for a second about the gap that we're trying to fulfill with whatever this thing is we think we want, because that gap itself can be real or perceived. Now, real, you want to pick up bread at the grocery because there's no bread in your kitchen. Perceived, you want to meet someone to prove that you're worthy of being with someone. It could also come from comparison. Well, if other people can have this or do that, why can't I? What's wrong with me? And again, all wants are that basic. They're that primal. I mean, you can make all the lists you want and take all the so-called right actions, but without this understanding clarity of what it represents to you and what you want to be different and how you want to feel different, you'll still be fighting yourself. Yourself. It's so primal, in fact, that investing the time up front to understand what you really want, or more accurately, why you want what you really want and what it means to you, that's actually a shortcut. It can save you years of frustration. So isn't that worth investing in a little bit of time and whatever it takes? So there's a process. Okay, there's a process I like to use, and it's called 7 layers deep or 7 layers of why. And I did not develop this particular process, but I use it all the time because it is so helpful and getting you to your true why. And it's the why, it's this why that you'll come back to when the going gets tough, or when you're ready to give up, or it seems like nothing is working out. It's this why. The why is your driver. It's the thing, this thing that is the end result. Whatever you find at the end of this process, it may surprise you. Okay? You ready? It's really complicated. You're going to want to take detailed notes. Yeah, it's a little snarky. So here's how it works. You're going to ask yourself 7 questions. Okay? Ready? What do I want? No holds barred. What do I want? Why is that important to me? Well, why is that important to me? What would be different? Why is that thing important to me? What would be different there? Okay, why is that important to me? What would be different about that? Really? Why is that important to me? What would be different? What would feel different? And why is that important to me? What would really be different? How would I feel different? Okay? It really is very, very incredibly simple, but simple doesn't always mean easy. In fact, there's a discipline that's involved in simple that makes us feel like it's not simple at all. It's just not easy all the time. So let's use my desire for a dream house as an example. Okay, question 1. What do I want? A dream house. Well, why do I want a certain type of house? What does that mean? It makes a statement about me. Why is that important to me? Why do I need a house to make a statement about me? Well, it tells me and everyone else that I am worthy. Well, wait a minute. Why is that important? How did my house become a measure of my worthiness? Well, the house I grew up in didn't feel like a home. It felt like I wasn't good enough for home. So I went off script just a little bit here. That's okay. Well, now, wait a minute. What am I asking my house to do for me? To create a feeling of home. Well, okay. So why is a feeling of home important? And what will be different for me if I have a place that really feels like home? Well, that would feel like having a sanctuary for me and a gathering place for my family and friends, my kindred spirits. But what would really be different? And does it take a particular house? What would be different for me if that were true, this sanctuary and gathering spot? I would finally feel like I belong somewhere. Wow, that was at the bottom. I would feel like I belong. See, I had thought moving was about adventure and dream house architecture, when really it was a deep-rooted search for home, or the feeling of home. And at the end of this process, this thought presented itself. Okay? If home is where the heart is, then I'm currently homeless. Ouch. Oh, ouch. There's no house on the planet that can fix that. Okay? There's not enough money to buy the biggest, fanciest house to change that. Okay? It turns out the that hidden reason, not just for me, the real reasons, they're not unique at all. What lies beneath any of the things we want, even those silly sandals, that's where we find our answers. For most questions, it takes 7 rounds of this asking why, asking why, asking why. Some can take more. It doesn't really matter. In fact, a few will take less, but still, it doesn't matter how many times you ask into it. It's getting to the root that's important. And if you allow yourself to feel what each why looks like, why is that important? You'll feel it. You will feel it when you got to the bottom of it, when you hear. And also, I have to fess up. The example I just shared with you, that was not my first try. I had done this process before. And when I did it before, it really wasn't helpful, not at all. Not because of the process, because of me. I wasn't yet willing to be fully honest with myself. So, my first round was very superficial. It was still coming from firmly inside my comfort zone, my ego. Though I probably would have argued with you about that, because surely the reason I wanted a dream house was obvious. I deserved a better house. I wanted to move on. It was time for a new style. It was time for a new place. I mean, I do. I love adventure. And yet, true confession time, I wanted a new house every 7 years. So it was just like clockwork, I don't know, it was like the 7-year itch, I suppose. And it didn't matter how nice a house I was currently living in, okay? This thing was on autopilot. So there had to be some other empty space that was still trying to get filled. Now, that didn't mean it was a bad space. It didn't even mean it was a needy space. It just meant I needed to get to the bottom of the real desire. So at first, asking myself what wanting a dream house meant to me and why it was so important, and not being superficial, I mean, that felt like a real stretch. That's normal and natural. Because think about this, we're looking for a new perspective, and a new perspective, by definition, lives outside our comfort zone. So that puts our questioning, this why, that puts it on a collision course with perspectives and beliefs that are familiar, that we've been taught, that are part of our current internal operating system, and that we really believe. We believe them wholeheartedly. So resistance kicks in. And then with resistance, it's like this fog descends. It's a form of blindness. I call it the fog of the familiar, okay? Because it surrounds us, envelops us. We can't see through it. So we have to give ourselves permission to see through that fog of the familiar. And no one else can give us that. No one. I mean, a friend, a counselor, a coach, a pastor, a teacher, they can tell you they give you permission, but until you give it to yourself, there ain't nothing going to happen. So nobody else can give it to you. This is an internal process. And so to remind you again, anything you want and don't currently have, it already exists for you. But it's outside your comfort zone, outside the fog of the familiar. So as always, you have two choices. Always, you have these two choices. You can give yourself permission to see through the fog and familiar to see through the fog of the familiar, and to grow your comfort zone to where you can see more and understand more. Or you can stay right where you are, and you can shrink. You can shrink what you want to fit inside your current comfort zone. And that puts you on a collision course to just keep wanting and shrinking and wanting and shrinking and wanting and shrinking. And the thing is, there's not a third option. Grow your comfort zone or shrink to fit inside your current comfort zone. That's it. So, again, true confession. My first times at going through the 7 levels process for anything, not just the house example I gave you, but when I was first learning this process, it was all tangled up in my ego. My self-esteem was at stake, or actually maybe more accurately, my lack of self-esteem was at stake. And so, my first attempts, my first answers were all external. They were all superficial. They were all looking out there or something else. When underneath it all, everything I wanted was really about belonging. And it was just getting tangled up with these external wants, or, ego, status, anger, why won't she do what I want her to? Shoes. It was the sense of belonging was getting tangled up with this external surge. So let's be clear again, there is nothing wrong with wanting a dream house or anything else for that matter. Love of beauty is important. And to sort of stick with my dream house story, like a lot of people, I love beautiful architecture. I love beautiful interior design. I was a little kid who was cutting pictures out of mom's magazines and pasting them in a scrapbook. I so appreciated beautiful design, and my appreciation of beautiful design was not the problem. It wasn't even the reason for the quest. So again, my first attempt at digging into my why was mostly about what living in a beautiful house said about me to other people, or sitting in it and looking at this beauty that I had created, but from an ego perspective. It was how it all reflected on me. Okay? And it was maybe even about how it elevated me. And maybe my unconscious self was seeing it as a way to boost my self-esteem, my worth, my worthiness. Okay, and the most beautiful house in the world can't do that. How do I know? I've lived in some beautiful houses, and the old doubts and fears just moved right in with me. Wherever you go, there you are. If you ever read that book, it's a good one. So anyway, I wanted to find the real answer to what I wanted, and I had to become willing to dive beneath that surface into some very unfamiliar and uncomfortable territory. And it was time to get uncomfortable. Okay, it was time to open those old wounds and actually pour some salt in them, because salt stings in the moment and then it heals. So the solution to the mystery is that when you understand what you really want and why you want it, what it represents to you, then you can systematically design the getting of it. Now, we've been hoodwinked into thinking that our desires are out there somewhere, that they're, hiding behind hard work or impossible tasks, or even our own inadequacies. The harder you work, no, that didn't work, did it? The harder you work, the more frustrated you get, the more your self-esteem and self-worth suffer, because you're working harder. You know the rest of this is work harder, work smarter, not harder. Okay. Oh, that was the trip. So you wonder how it's even possible. How is it possible to try so hard and not come closer to your desires? In fact, in some instances, it feels like you're pushing them further away. And this is especially true when you just really feel like those desires are part of your destiny and your purpose. And so your mind chatter, it kind of goes something like this. Oh my gosh. Look at all the mistakes I've made. Oh, what a failure I am. Why can't I just do whatever it is? Other people have the things I want. It seems so easy for them. All that personal development stuff is just mumbo jumbo. None of this works. And then that can deteriorate into, oh gosh, maybe I wasn't meant to have this after all. Maybe it's just not for me in this lifetime. Or it could be like, well, I don't need much. I can get by without it. I can do with less. And maybe that's all I deserve anyway. But do you see how that tumbles down and further away? from what you really want. So once you understand what lies beneath, what this wanting is all about, and what it represents to you, how filling it will feel different to you, then you've actually cleared the first hurdle. And you've actually nudged your own perspective one click closer to becoming found by that desire. Because here's another little nugget. You know that desire already exists for you, or you wouldn't know to desire it. You wouldn't be able to picture it. The fact that you can picture it means it's already out there for you. And there's just a little chasm to cross. So, in my case, I went back to 7 layers of why. I use it all the time. Once I kind of got the hang of it, it just became one of those go-to processes. But I gave myself permission to get raw and real. And to stick with the dream house example, why was this desire for a dream house like this itch that never fully got scratched? I needed to know. Because if you don't dig into this answer with your own desires, whatever they are, the one thing I can promise you is they'll keep resurfacing. You'll keep feeling that very generalized dissatisfaction. It spreads. It spreads and infects, okay? And you'll keep trying to move away from this discomfort instead of towards what you really want. And you'll keep trying to fill that empty spot with something. And you know what? Very often you'll be filling it with something that is not quite it. So your homework for this session is to pick one thing, just one thing that you want, and then submit it to the 7 layers of why process to see what you find at the bottom. Before you start, commit to yourself that you're giving yourself permission. Peel back the fog, to get outside your comfort zone, to get outside your ego, to get really raw and real with yourself. And commit that you'll do it more than once if you need to. Okay? That's all. That's all you need to do is start digging into why you want what you want. All right. That's it for today. Bye for now. We'll be back with session 3 in a few days. Let this percolate, let it sink in and soak in, because it's not enough to just go through the motions with any of this. Because if just going through the motions would work, we wouldn't be having this conversation, right? So, bye for now.